Hello, can we hear everybody? Everybody here? Cool. We're
Hello.
here. All right, guys, welcome to a new episode of the Unfiltered Historian. We are back for a new season, and today we are super excited to start out with our new fall series with Ted Savas tonight. So, very, very excited to have you on, Ted. Welcome to an episode of Unfiltered Conversations.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Anytime, man. So, gentlemen, it has been a long time since we've been able to get together and have a proper unfiltered conversation. So, glad to have you guys here as well, always to keep us in check here. We have some commenters already coming in. Braceface Jerry says hello, and Liz H says very saved by the bell screensaver. Okay. That's a heck of a way to start this out. Josh, we need to unpack what's happening on your screen there. I see Abraham Lincoln, and you were holding your shirt up. Very interesting.
Yeah, because I'm a history buff, son.
You're a history buff. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, and
I just said I thought the president would like to be involved in the interview too.
Good deal.
He's just listening and he's chilling.
Alrighty, everybody.
Ready?
We're gonna
kind
of go in pretty quickly here as Anthony's showing us his Vote Lincoln shirt and seeing some love from the wilderness. Joe LaFleur popping in there as well. Joe, welcome to the stream here. So Ted, this is your first time on the Unfiltered, and again, we're really excited to have you here. The way this works is we just sit here and have a conversation and unpack whatever gets unpacked, I guess, to say very least.
Yeah, fantastic.
Let's hear a little bit about you. If you want to introduce yourself to our guests here over on the internet.
Yeah, sure. First, I've got a little cold tonight. Can you believe that? So I'm sorry about that.
It's all good, man.
Oh, yeah. Hitting that mic and muting it a few times. Yeah, so I'm Ted Savas. I now live in Myrtle Beach. Grew up in Iowa and went to school there, went to law school there, got a BA in history and most of a master's in history as well. Moved to California in the mid-'80s, practiced law for quite a while, started a publishing program at the same time, had two businesses, ended up selling one, my law practice, and going into publishing full-time, and here I am.
That's awesome, man. And what an amazing publication. Like just the amount of books you have that I can look at on any shelf that I'm in my room or out in my closets there. Like I see all these books with SB on the back. I'm telling you, you have put probably more books on my shelf than any other publisher on this earth. So
that's great.
Yeah, huge thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least 20 books over there.
Yeah, so I did the same thing the other day. I stood there and stared at my bookshelf, and all I could see was SB. So, yeah,
there you go.
They do reach over the pond.
Well, what you want to do though is you want to go back and find some from Savas Woodbury, who's the first publishing company I started, and then Dave he left after a few years, and we're still friends today, and haven't seen him for a while. And then they went to Savas Publishing Company. And then I sold that company in 2000.
Okay.
And then restarted a new company, Savas Beatie, in 2004. So some of the earlier ones are good too. Battle of Bentonville, Last Raise of Departing Hope, the Wilmington Campaign. There's quite a few good ones there.
No kidding there. Let's see. We've got David Pope over here saying, just got Captain Seymour's memoir in the mail today from Savas Beatie. There you go.
Yeah, it's a good new one.
Very
Enjoy
cool.
it, David.
So, Ted, can I just ask you a question? If people want to get stuff over the pond, do you use a company here in the UK that you particularly?
Yeah, we do. So our distributor is Casemate Publishing, and Casemate UK handles our book sales in Great Britain and on the continent. So if there's anything in particular you want and you live over there, just go to Casemate UK, and they'll take care of you.
Sweet.
Cool.
Casemate puts out some cool stuff too, and
they do.
One of the unique books I wanted to talk to you about. So we mentioned Yorktown right before we went on live. There was a book. I think it was Jerome Green. Do I have the name right there?
Yeah,
I do. Awesome. So that was the book that helped me understand Yorktown, if you will.
That's interesting. That book has an interesting pedigree.
Okay.
So somebody, I don't remember. Somebody sent me a copy. It's really two books at first, and it was two archaeological studies. One, the Washington's army, the French army, an archaeological study of their positions,
right,
and the other was the study of the British positions. And I had them on my shelf for quite a while, and I was flipping through them, and I really enjoyed them. And I knew there was nothing that I thought should be. I thought there needed to be something else done on Yorktown, and I thought these two offered an amazingly different perspective.
Sure.
So I contacted him, and we blended them together, and then edited them together to come up with what you've got today. And it's done very well. I don't think it's ever been out of print.
That's incredible to hear. Yeah, I mean, I can't explain enough. There are a few that I've read. Like there was one called "The Brilliance of Yorktown," which is great. You know, Whitemane put that out a while ago, and that was awesome to read. But when I came across that Yorktown book in particular, the maps and you know, when you mentioned that the fortifications, there was almost a feel like a fortification study to that book too. And someone who grew up in the wilderness in the Spotsylvania County area, that's what I'm surrounded by, is all these trenches and fortifications. So
Sure.
it was almost eye-opening to see, wow, there are so many different fortifications out there that were very similar in a way to what I'm living in at the time. So I think that helped also to make it easier and to approach it from that fortifications type study, if you will. I think that's what really made that click in my head. So that book, very, very high spot on the bookshelf for sure. So
Cool.
I wanted to see, it was more unique that I've read, and I'm like, wow, this is it. Like everything about this is right. And if I'm not mistaken, that was NPS as well at one point, right? Was that in conjunction with or a part of?
Well, he worked with the National Park Service when he put those together, so he couldn't take any royalties. So we donated our royalties back to the park, and we didn't need special permission to do those, but we got it anyway, and then we're donating the royalties to the park.
Okay, very cool. And David Pope asked if it was Rev War Yorktown. Yes, indeed. We were talking about Revolutionary War Yorktown. Jim Schmick says hello. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Ted, I'd like to know how you got into history in the first place, and what was your, what got you interested?
I don't ever remember a time in my life when I wasn't interested in history. So, I mean, all the way back when I was just a little kid, I remember laying on the ground with my World Book encyclopedias, Book of Knowledge, they were called. There's like 30 of them or something. And I would flip through and I would read the Civil War and read history and ancient studies. And I mean, I've always liked it a lot. When I was about 12, I think I was 11 or 12, my grandfather is Greek immigrant, never went to school, ran a bunch of restaurants. He came home one day with a battered copy of Lee's Lieutenants, Volume 1, without a jacket. And he bought it at a rummage sale for $0.10, and he thought I'd like it. God knows why he thought I would like it. I have no idea. Just serendipitous. And I read that book, didn't understand a lot of it, but I knew that I found it really fascinating. I found out that there was 3 volumes, right? So I read the second volume. And then I read the third volume in a station wagon and on a stoop of a brownstone in Brooklyn, New York, which we would visit in the summertime. And after I read that trilogy, I was completely hooked.
No kidding. Joe LaFleur on Facebook says, I'm holding a fresh Captain Seymour that came yesterday. I have another Terry Jones on Lee's Tigers. That's golden.
Terry Jones is a good friend of mine. Yeah,
no
I'm
kidding.
really glad we were able to publish this for him.
Awesome. David Pope, that's one of my favorite parks. The flags really help you understand who was doing what where. That's actually a good point. So, Ted, fun little fact. I'm sure you know this, but there are flags that denote fortification locations throughout that part of the NPS, and that was really cool to see too. So that he's right, that does help a little bit. Yeah. So
sorry, my restream acted all up. What park was that?
Yorktown. Rev War Yorktown. I've had a friend that actually took me into the woods way further than I ever thought I'd go at Yorktown, and saw some of the batteries that are back there from the Civil War, and that was really cool. And those are places, like I said. Go ahead.
Closest foreign military cemetery to Washington, D.C.
Yorktown.
Yeah.
Oh, fun fact of the day. Thank you, Anthony.
Killed by some of their.
I knew you was on here for some reason.
Killed by some of your people.
Who, me?
Well, that's if you count the Confederates.
Just me.
So, Ted, I do have a question too. Since I saw Joe brought it up earlier, so Joe, thank you for actually saying some. Payne's Farm, is that something I can talk about with you? Because I actually have some interest in that as well. Being so close to
sure.
It. Yeah, and I want to understand, so what got you started with Payne's Farm, and how did that become?
Well, so we don't lose anybody. Payne's Farm was basically the largest battle of the Mine Run campaign in the fall of 1863. So I read an article in, I think, Civil War Times Illustrated back in the early 60s, and they had a big mine run issue. And I was reading it, and I read Payne's Farm. I thought it was quite interesting. And then I read a book in the Howard series, the little white Virginia series on Mine Run, which is very thin, not a lot in the book, really. But I read the several pages on Payne's Farm. And I thought it was really quite interesting. And so I started going back and looking at all the original sources. I have a lot of, I have the ORs and, a lot of the different kinds of things. So I started reading it, and it didn't make a lot of sense to me because the way the troops were oriented and the way the reports were written out, it just didn't make sense. And I was traveling back to Virginia, and I don't remember what year it was. I want to say it was like 90. And a buddy of mine I had just met the year before in Richmond, Paul Sacra, I told him I'm coming back, and I wanted to go hunt out the Payne's Farm battlefield. So he said he knew a buddy up there, a guy who owned a bunch of land up there, and he might own some of the field. And let's go find him and take a look. So
right.
I armed myself with a bunch of official reports and diary entries and different sorts of things. And he introduced us to this guy who owned most of the land. And the guy said, yeah, go ahead, but there's no battle fought here. It was like a mile that way or 2 miles and, all that. So we went to the intersection where there was a Confederate battery that was supposed to be firing. And there's the intersection. And we started looking around, and there's the farm lane, and there's a second farm lane down the road. And so I thought, well, this looks like it's it just by looking at the accounts. So we started walking some of the generals' accounts and some of the regimental accounts, and everything was perfect. I'll give you one example. So when we're standing in the intersection of the Raccoon Ford Road and the Widow Morse Road, Carpenter's Guns had a section set up there, and the North Carolinians, I think it was the 3rd for Maryland Stewart's brigade.
Okay.
They had talked about forming just off the road in a ravine and charging out of the ravine. And so we got permission. There's a little house over there. We got permission to go in their backyard. Went about 30, 40 yards back into the woods, and there's this giant ravine. And I thought, okay, we're on to something here. And we had metal detectors. So we started hunting. And I think totally we pulled out something like 1,500 relics. From the field. Yeah. And so then we went down the road a little bit to where the old Stonewall Brigade advanced. And they talked about how, it's an undulating piece of ground. It's in the woods, and you go a couple hundred yards, you come to a fence, and there's this big field, and the Union guys are on the other side. It's exactly like that today. I mean, the land is the same. There's still a fence where it's supposed to be. The fields are the same. Nothing's changed. So we just started hunting everything and started laying out and keeping maps of the relics we were finding. And it was all the same. Nothing had changed. And so one of the cool things was we tried to map the whole field, try to figure out where the edges of the battlefield were. We spent probably 3 years doing it. And we went up to the Union position on the left-hand side. I've called that Kiefer's Ridge. And it's stuck now. It's Kiefer's Ridge. And that's where the Union guys were that were charged by the Jones's Virginians and Stafford's Louisiana Brigade. And they fired into that ridge for several hours. We found hundreds and hundreds of Confederate bullets in the front of that ridge.
No kidding.
And on the top of the ridge, we found stacked, unfired Union rounds. Because they were just up there dumping them out and using them. It was crazy. So yeah, that's Payne's Farm. And so when I went down to Will Green, who was a buddy of mine who ran APCWS in Fredericksburg at the time, and I was telling him about this battlefield, and he was kind of, I don't know. And so we started dumping relics on his desk, and I showed him a map of our thing. He got really excited about it. And then eventually, after a number of years, the American Battlefield Trust bought the land, and it's preserved now. So we're really excited about it.
Yeah, and I've had the opportunity to venture out there quite a few times, and it's beautiful land, and it helps with a lot of the signs that are out there now. And that Mercury, I think it's a Mercury, the car that's sitting out there. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. That old vehicle that's sitting out. That was one unique things you see on a battlefield. We go there for the history of the Civil War, and sometimes you just see these nice little things like that. It is
Well,
junk.
there's a lot of little stories about that field. The field is almost identical to the way it was. It's a little more overgrown now, and you can tell at the base of the farm lane there was a lot of Confederate action there. There's a couple guys that are buried there. We've got letters. They were buried after the battle. They couldn't. They came back and tried to find them, and they couldn't. Those are the Confederates. I know there are 2 mass graves on the field still. That have been found because somebody hunted them, not us. And so we were asking them to just show us where the graves were so we could get them reinterred properly into a cemetery. The guy wouldn't do it, but they're out there, and I think they're both Confederate. But there's a lot of neat things out on that field, and we found a Louisiana harmonica behind the fence line in Payne's Farms. Not much left, but it was harmonica.
Right.
There's just there's a lot of neat things on that field.
No kidding. Yeah, I think you helped maybe answer Joe's question down there as well. He said a Payne descendant wanted me to help her find a cemetery there today. Did you see one around there?
Yeah, I think the Zora's Church is across the street, and if I remember correctly, I think they have a small cemetery.
They do. I know exactly. Yeah, I've been there a couple of times.
That's the only one I know. Now I'm leading a tour there. I think on November 25th of this year.
No kidding.
Yeah, I think there's a busload of people coming, and so there's a tour there. So
who's that? Yeah, that's actually really cool. No kidding.
Yeah.
Is there what would you say is the book on that battle and campaign?
There isn't one.
There isn't one.
Chris has got a tiny little book, hasn't he? Emergency of War one.
Yeah, there's one in there, and I wrote the Payne's Farm afterward, or whatever
it
is there, appendix or something in that. Are you familiar with Jeff Hunt, who's done the campaign from post Gettysburg on? Right,
he wrote one about one of my favorite battles in this book.
Station. Yeah, it's terrific, and he submitted that to us. He won't mind me telling you this as one book, and it was. And I said, well, this is really good stuff, but it's really
no way.
Maybe 3 books, maybe 4. And he was, no, it's not. I don't want to break it up. And thankfully, he listened to me because I persuaded him that it's not one book.
No,
so he's done immediately after Gettysburg, which redefines the end of the campaign. I think it's brilliant.
I'd agree.
And then, of course, he did Bristow Station, and he's done the Rappahannock campaign, and now the last one he's finishing up. It's all written. He's just redoing it. Is on the Mine Run campaign.
Cool.
Oh, sweet. So there's going to be a 4th volume to that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, I have all 3 of those so far, and like I said, that Rappahannock.
Yeah, they're very good.
One,
very well done.
Yes, they are. And to complement that, one thing that I love doing with I'm going to throw your Map Atlas series a plug through too, because those are some of my beyond favorites that you guys are able to put out. The Mine Run maps, as well as the Rappahannock Station maps that are in that whole Bristow campaign series that you guys have put out. That was, and I mean, I can't tell you how helpful. Joe's commenting here. Him and I actually spent some time out at Rappahannock Station, and we had that in my hands. Like, I literally had that book following all the movement and being able to get where you could with the development that is obviously kind of hit that area. But there's still a lot of accessibility with the development there. I mean, there are fire lanes straight down to the Rappahannock, and then you look over to where that park is being. I don't know what the status is with the county government yet, but I know that park has been zoned as a park, and people do go and swim there. So we were also had a chance to go down to that part and see some of the
that's cool.
Trestles of the bridge. So yeah, like those series help for that, because without those and without any signage out there, it's really hard to kind of
know where you are and what you're doing. Yeah,
right.
Sure.
It's kind of like the when you work or volunteer at Antietam, we tell people don't read them signs. And people will be like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "You're going to have zero clue where you are. Why is it saying like 40 yards that way?" Those books, there's like Tyler's saying, there's map books. I've done that before with the Fredericksburg ones too. It just makes it easier to digest because you're sitting there and you have an explanation of what it is, and then you see it, and then you can see it right in front of you.
Yeah, so those are, I mean, just amazing. In fact, I think I have to credit the Gettysburg map book to that big light bulb moment in my head for the first time at Gettysburg a few years ago. So Ted, I interned for the Park Service way back in 2016, like way back. We had that COVID thing, so way back I hope applicable now to 2016 because good lord.
Lifetime.
Well, you can just call it 2016 BC
Yeah, no kidding.
before COVID.
Yeah, seriously. But
Yeah.
at that time, I had a chance to go with a fellow intern to Gettysburg for the first time in my, being this involved with history. I went with my father 7th grade, so I wasn't as involved as I was in 2016. So when I went up there, I actually had the opportunity to have, again, that map book in my hand. So I was at the Peace Light Memorial of all things, and I had just turned it a little bit and oriented myself to the position I was standing in, and looking out on like where the Forney farm was and being able to see the railroad cut just briefly. That was that first aha moment I had on any battlefield, and that was awesome. So again,
I was there a week ago.
Yeah, I saw you guys had the meetup, which I want to talk to you about those because those are pretty instrumental to the Savas Beatie, if I'm not mistaken. Like those are some pretty fun times from what I hear too.
They are. Yeah. Hello, Terry.
Oh, Terry Renzel popped in. Hey, Terry. And Joe said right after the sesquicentennial. Okay. But yeah, how did the meetup go? Like, talk a little bit about those meetups for us too. Like, how did you end up starting that?
Meetup's cool. Years ago, we had one some years ago, and then we didn't have any for a while. I'm not sure why. Then we've had, I think, 3 or 4 in a row. So I got an idea. I'm looking at all these I used to go on meetings with Jerry Russell and the Civil War Congress, and you'd get a bus and you'd be in a hotel and you'd have meetings and you'd go out in the field and all that. It could get kind of expensive and the whole thing. And I started thinking one day, with so many authors, certainly we could get a bunch of them together. And why couldn't we just do a meetup at a park instead of trying to hire a bus and pay all that nonsense? Why don't we just all just get a Facebook page, get together, organize it, get a schedule, and meet where we want to meet for a tour, and whoever wants to come can come, and we just hold these tours and then go inside and we have some talks at the Heritage Center, that sort of thing. And we started doing that. I think we charge like $25 registration fee just to because you have to sort of have a general head count, but and it covers some of the costs, and then everything else is just free. You're on your own. And so we just did, I think, our 3rd or 4th one in a row. Just a lot of fun. We had 120, 130 people.
Oh wow!
Yeah, we have to limit it. We could have 250. Awesome. I mean, because of the permits, you have to sort of limit it. Right. So we could have, and we didn't have a lot of room to meet for the talks. You sort of have to limit it. But
sure,
it's I'm trying to build a community of people who are. We're not just people who study the Civil War. We're people who study the Civil War together. And so, we trade things, we trade books, we trade ideas, we trade manuscripts, we trade sources, we help each other. We enjoy it together. And there are some hobbies where you can do that. And this is one of them. And it's always kind of surprised me. And I was out in California all those years and I was doing this from California, and I'm wondering, why aren't publishers on the East Coast doing this kind of stuff? Right. It's mind-boggling to me. And so I decided, well, I'm going to do it. And so we've been doing it, and it's a great way for people to meet people. We get to meet people. I get to meet some of my authors. We don't get to meet a lot of our authors. And
right.
So it's just fun. And we just enjoy putting it together and watching people enjoy themselves.
And I'm looking at the people are commenting left and right. We have Dan Masters saying that the meetup was awesome. The weather wasn't on Saturday, but what a great event. Andrea Quinn says the meetup was fantastic. And Eric Cole is also saying, agree, meetup was awesome. Wade and I even caused a little trouble. That doesn't surprise me. Mark Wade causing trouble.
Mark Wade's always causing trouble.
No, he is.
Yeah, Andrea's there. Hey, Andrea, Eric, Dan. It's good to see you guys.
I'll tell you what, I like Mark. Mark's a fellow Baltimore guy. We can relate quite a bit there.
Yeah, Mark's a good guy. He's been a customer of mine since like 1990.
Oh, no.
And when I used to go to book shows back on the East Coast, I'd fly to the East Coast. I'd do some early book shows with Civil War Regiments, our journal. And I met Mark then, and I sort of knew him from that. And it was probably, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, when I found out that he was on the West Coast. He'd been transferred for one of his jobs or something. So we started getting together, and we just became, better acquainted.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
I enjoy the memes between the two of you quite a bit. I think, see, that's another thing I love about Savas Beaties. We get those fun memes out of that too. So, you're really right in saying that you build that community. And I think that's something that this field, I don't want to say has been lacking because it's been there forever. But the accessibility to the community, I think, has been something that's been hard to.
Yeah, I think it needed to be pulled together. I think there's a lot
Sure.
of threads that were dangling, and we just needed to kind of pull everybody together. I mean, it's a serious business, right?
Yeah.
Publishing serious. It's a real business. It's a hard business. It's a time-consuming business, but it doesn't mean you can't have fun. And I remember going to some of these things and meeting some authors that I wanted to meet before I was in publishing. And I was so great to be able to meet them and get a signature and take a picture and say hi. And so now why don't we do this? Because if I enjoyed it so much before I was a publisher, there are a lot of people here that would just enjoy it just as much, but no, it's hard to do. Where can you get together with 20 of your favorite authors?
Right.
You're for free. So that's what we're trying to do. And then people get excited and they read the books and it creates a groundswell of activity that I'm trying to encourage people to pass on to their friends, to their kids, to their, to their grandkids, to start that next generation up.
Sure.
Any plans to go west for the next one?
Probably not the next one, but yes, west. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to do Chickamauga area.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is in Gettysburg, it's easy, Antietam, because there's hotels there. It's easy you can take your spouse and they can go out if they're not interested, they can do their thing. And so it's a little harder out west, but we are going to do them. And the other thing we're going to do, because now that I'm in Myrtle Beach, is there's no reason why we can't do smaller fields and do a one-day deal. Mm-hmm. So why not just have 3 or 4 historians together, 25 people, and hit one thing? Maybe we do Wilmington. Maybe we do Fort Sumter, Charleston, and
I'm itching for the South Carolina site. So I mean, that's
there's a lot of neat things we can do.
Sure.
We don't have to do the big fields all the time,
right?
But so we're looking at all those options. Yeah.
Okay. Sweet. We have comments coming in. David Pope, I only have 9 SB titles. Looking forward to several 2023 releases. We have Dan Master saying Stones River beckons. AQ over here next year tour of Barlow's Knoll. Make Anthony happy, won't it? Anthony's
that's exactly what I was about to say.
I was going to say, oh man, somebody just triggered Anthony because he's over there like, hey, Barlow. Jim Schmick says, are most of your authors from the East?
Well, they're mostly from east of the Mississippi. Let's put it that way. And then if you really wanted to break it down, I guess you could say probably a majority are east of the Appalachians. Yeah.
All right. And David Pope said Secessionville would be fun.
Secessionville would be good. Yeah. In fact, we did the first book on Secessionville with Savas Publishing with Pat Brennan, who's done our Gettysburg and Color books. Mm-hmm. Pat and I have been friends for forever, and he did the Battle of Secessionville back in 97-ish. Phenomenal book. If you get a chance, grab that book. We just did one in the Emerging Civil War series by James Morgan, who's
Ball's Bluff fame, right?
Yeah,
no kidding.
Yeah, and that's redid Secessionville with some touring information and all. That's very good. Yeah.
Okay. I vote we do Lincoln at Gettysburg tour. There's a lot of Lincoln at Gettysburg tours, but
there are
a lot of those. So
I agree with you guys. Gettysburg, the bigger fields are a little overplayed.
Yeah, and as much as I love Antietam, I get it too. You're not wrong. Like Totopotomy Creek would be a fun. Like, could you imagine a random tour out of just like Totopotomy Creek, of all things? I know Chris would be happy with that. So I had to shout it out for Chris because I know he would like that.
North Anna.
That too.
For example, most people know Lincoln at Gettysburg. Why not Lincoln at Harper's Ferry? When he visited there and did the troop review.
Ted, you you published a book about Lincoln in a very specific and kind of unique spot during the Civil War, didn't you?
I don't know.
The Navy, when he was down there at Hampton.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was a mind blow for me. Like, I had no idea.
Did you read that?
I did.
Yeah. I did. That's the book by Oh my
It's
gosh.
literally sitting on my shelf across the room. Like,
Oh
Yeah.
my God. One of the problems is we have so many books, I
Mhm.
forget,
That's
but
okay.
it's Lincoln Takes Command.
Yes,
And
it is.
yeah, and it's a phenomenal by Norder, Steve Norder.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a book. When he presented it to me, I thought, I don't know, and it doesn't sound that interesting. And then I read it, and it's how they ended up capturing Norfolk and Lincoln actually literally taking command and overseeing a joint combined operation. Absolutely fascinating, and it's both Union and Confederate sides. It's mostly Union, but there's a lot of Confederate stuff in there.
Yeah.
The Virginia, the ending of the Virginia, it's really good.
Yeah, it blew me away. 'Cause I mean, that's one of those things that you just don't have any idea about, and then you read it and you're like,
No, and
where was this?
It hasn't done as well. It hasn't done as well as it should, and I'll tell you why. It's one of those books that got caught in the COVID problem. So just as it was coming out, all the bookstores and all the parks and everything was shutting down.
Oh man.
And then this bottleneck started and the supply chain problem started. And we just had, it's just one of about 4 or 5 books in that season that just got caught at the wrong time. And it's really, really a shame.
I wish it did better because that is a fantastic book. I mean, I'm glad to have found that. I think I was a Barnes & Noble acquisition during COVID, actually, because that was one of the only stores that just started
make
opening.
Sure you post a review on that.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll have to do that. Yeah, I might go back and reread that and give it another review because, like I said, I loved it when it came out. That was awesome.
Ted, I know you mentioned the COVID backlog there. How far are you from getting back through and back to some kind of normality?
That's really a good question. As some of our authors know, there's a lag time. So the problem with COVID, a lot of people don't realize that aren't in the industry or working in industries that got really hit by this is there were paper shortages, printing shortages, ink shortages, cloth shortages, staffing shortages. And then when they finally got back to printing on the line, they were having that 6-foot spacing thing. And so they couldn't man their equipment. So they were, they weren't printing as many books as they could print.
Right.
So part of the problem we ran into wasn't just the supply chain issue. It used to take, let's say, 7 weeks to turn around a hardcover. So you'd send it to, like, say, a Michigan printer. And by the time it was sent back to you, it's about 7 weeks. It went up to 28 weeks. So imagine adding another like 5 months or something. And the problem that creates is we work in 2 6-month cycles. And so you're planning ahead for your next cycle. And even if you're on time, you're already months late. And so you can't satisfy the wholesale orders because they time out. And so you can't work ahead of time because you've got books you haven't worked on yet. And it created this gigantic bottleneck. To go to back to the point of your question. So we started working through that, and I would say we're probably 2/3 of the way or 3/4 of the way through that bottleneck. But now we're starting to find again that we're having paper shortages, cloth shortages, and certain kinds of things that we really like to use in our books. They're creating delays now, and that's a problem. And so it never quite ends, and we're trying to catch up and push through it. And we're almost there, but it's still there.
Yeah. And that's the thing I love about seeing you guys continuing to flourish through this is like, there are people that stick around. Like we know, and I think most of the folks that have Savas Beatie titles on their shelves understand what happened. And you've got some loyal folks here that like to stay around and like, hey, we'll wait for the book. It's okay. Like we understand the time limit. That's perfectly fine. Just keep doing what you guys do because the titles are still coming.
And we appreciate that. I mean,
that's awesome to see. Like seriously,
we do appreciate that.
Yeah, you think about the music industry because we'll get to talk about that here in a few minutes. But like, how many people are going to wait around that long for an album, and to have a product that is so sellable to where people are willing to wait through the hurdles, like that's a rewarding thing to see. Like you've got those people that are here.
It's very humbling. We're really pleased about that, and we have really good authors, and people really want to read them, and we appreciate that. Our distributor was very, very patient about it because they understand the problems, right? They were going through the same kind of problems. So, It's an issue, and
Sure.
we print color overseas because you can't print color in the States, and it just kills me to know. No, you can't print color in the States.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, because it's like 3.5 times as high as overseas, and the margins don't work at all. You just can't do it. And so I won't print in China. I won't print a pencil in communist China. So we'll go to India, we'll go to South Korea, we'll go to the Czech Republic, and but the problem printing in Asia in the East was what used to take 4 months to get a book started taking 8, and then you couldn't get them unloaded in the ports, and I mean and you'd have people screaming at you, where are these books? And they're sitting on a ship in Long Beach and they were supposed to be in our office, but they can't get anybody to empty the ships. I mean, there's just problems everywhere. And our job is to deal with the problems. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And like I said, you guys put out enough stuff to where we're willing to wait, man. So
when you're sitting there with this book in your hand, you don't realize what goes into it.
Right.
There's a lot.
it's a journey. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's a human endeavor. Nothing's perfect. Some books are just damn near perfect, and others just have some problems, and you got different editors and different things. But it's so labor intensive,
right?
And there are so many steps involved in these projects, and you got to have the right people editing it and who know the material and know how to work with editors and authors and sources. And and it's hard to find those. There are only a handful of people who can do that. Then they have to be able to write well too. And that's one of the reasons. I mean, I hate it when people say, let me be honest. Well, I'm being honest the whole time, but let me tell you something else that's true. There are only a handful of good editors who know how to really do this kind of thing. And we could put out twice as many books, but it would mean they wouldn't get edited. And so I know there are some publishers in different genres. They put out all kinds of books, and most of them really truly are not even edited. And they don't care. And
I've seen that a lot. Yeah. And I'm glad you do. Yeah.
I won't name the companies. I could name the companies. I won't name them.
Yeah. That's, I'm probably, Yeah.
I mean, I see, let's say I reject a manuscript in January. I'll see it out in May with a different company.
And it's that quick.
I know how long it takes to get a book accepted and then put into production. And, it takes a long time.
You see it skip those hurdles. It's like,
that famous saying,
they just took the book and threw a cover on it and didn't edit it and put it out. And, and then I just won't do that. And if I'm going to be a little late on my books, I'll be late on my books, but I'm going to put out the best book I can.
That's right. And that's why we keep coming back, man. Because
quality over quantity. That's what I say.
Yeah.
I've had some experiences about that because let's just use an example. I study a specific general quite a bit, and I have read a lot of things from a specific publisher that just, things I've never heard of, and I've had to go and fact check back and forth. And I have official records as well, so I've been through them and trying to, corroborate with what I'm reading, and it never adds up, or it's the readability too. And sometimes, I hate to bring up pricing, but it's even the pricing. Like sometimes paperbacks going for hardcover prices.
Yeah, let me. What you're seeing there's one company in particular that prices paperbacks ridiculously high.
Yeah, it's like.
But the reason is that's their market. Their market is the academic market, and so they're selling, 80% of their books into academia, and so they can get those prices for them, and that's really what they're doing. Nathan asked the question: how much editing is involved, and how many manuscripts do you reject? Let me take the second part of that first.
Yeah,
probably 9 out of 10 manuscripts are rejected. Anyway, we get 1 a day to 5 a day, and they're not all Civil War. I mean, we do some other areas too, and sometimes we get. Obviously stuff that doesn't apply to us at all. I don't even respond to those because we tell them,
it's like,
unless we publish what you're going to submit, don't bother.
Right. There's guidelines here, dude.
It's crazy. But some of the stuff people send us, but we reject most of them almost immediately. I'm a contrarian in life about everything, right? I have a contrary view of almost everything. And one of the contrary views I have, or at least I'll say it publicly or others won't, is that if the research is really good and the topic is original and fresh. And I look at the bibliography, I'm thinking, okay, this guy or gal really worked hard on this. This is good. I don't care what the writing is.
Right.
Because we will work with the author to develop the writing. And sometimes we really work. I work personally with authors just to help them if I think they're really good potential.
Right.
And other times we let the author do as much as the author can possibly do, and then the editor comes in and does the rest. And the unwritten or the unpublished, I guess, for lack of a better word, secret is that most authors are not great writers. In the Civil War field, well, a lot of fields.
Right.
They're just not great writers, but they have really, really, really good editors. They tend to have good ideas. They know how to attack a subject. They're good researchers. They understand the fields, just to use the Civil War analogy.
Sure.
But they're not particularly great writers. Well, with a lot of presses, that keeps you from getting in. And I don't like to be a gatekeeper, because if there's talent out there, talent should be developed. And so we'll work with people on that score. And
that's awesome.
Truly, it's the editor. It's often the editor that comes in and helps the author shine, right? It helps get the author's story through. And that's really, really important.
Yeah, Nathan brings it. He said, really, as someone who is not a great writer, that is somewhat reassuring, but that is also humbling to hear. And he's not wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm not.
I won't. I mean, I'm not going to tell you names. There are authors I know that publish with us or publish with other companies that I know really well, right? They're friends of mine. They're all friends of mine that are not good writers at all and win multiple awards because they're terrific researchers and they really know their stuff and they can tell a story in that sense. But a good editor comes along and helps them and gets the story out. And because the story should be out.
That's it. And that's the thing. Like, editors are the behind the scenes things. There's someone who has written and had some stuff published. Like, I'm not a great writer. And I admit
think
that.
Think of it this way. You know what, Tyler? Think of it this way. Because in an analogy, you'll appreciate. So you're a band and you write a song and you go into the studio. If you have a really good producer, very often that song is not the same song when it's recorded on vinyl. Right?
Nowhere close.
The chorus is different. It's repeated. This is over here. You change this over here. Change the tempo here. And they're like an editor in the studio. And you've heard bands. You've seen the documentaries. You've read the books where I think Mutt Lange did it with Def Leppard. I know Martin Birch did it with Iron Maiden, where the band members are so mad because they have to do this again. They got to do it a different way. They want to change. It's like an author who gets pissed because you're telling them that goes in a footnote. That chapter needs to be broken in half. Here's why. And in the end, the product's fantastic because you've got experts all around molding it together and it works.
Absolutely.
So think of a producer in the music studio like a developmental editor of a book. Same thing.
That's super relatable. I like that. No, I see that because it's going through that process. And again, I haven't done a book or anything of that matter yet, but I've had some stuff out there. And
Sorry, I have a question in a
go ahead.
second.
No, go ahead. You can go ahead.
Yeah. So how much has the internet changed things, Ted? Because obviously now you've got things like Audible.
That's a good question.
With audio books. I know you've always had sort of some kind of audio book type thing. Also, you've got things like Kindle and things like that now. So how has that changed the way you're putting your product out?
Yeah, what a good question. My wife and I were just talking about that today, as a matter of fact. I mean, it radically changed everything. And when we go back and look at how we used to publish books and how we used to market books and what it is today, it's so radically different. It's unrecognizable. I'll give people who don't know just a quick rundown on this. When we used to this will make you laugh, I'm sure. When we first started in the early 90s and we were going to print a book, we had to print, there weren't files big enough to save them on. So we had to have this special disc. I don't remember. It was like a Maxim disc or something. I don't remember. And so you'd save it there. And then we had to send it down to Los Angeles to print it out at 300 DPI because nobody had 300 DPI printers commercially available. They'd send that back to us. We'd have to read through that, and any corrections we had to send back down
Oh no.
to reprint the pages to come back. So the page flow and everything had to be perfect. Now just imagine that, right?
Yeah.
Then we had to take that and send that to our printer in Michigan. The printer in Michigan had a film room with film tables, and they would shoot with cameras. They would shoot each page as a picture, and then they would turn it into film. And then they'd run them all together to make the plates to produce the books. It's insane, right?
It's mind-boggling. Yeah.
It's insane. And so today, of course, you don't do any of that. It's mind-boggling. When the internet started, and of course email and everything changed, that changed communications. I remember Bob Younger with Morningside. Tyler, you're probably too young to remember Bob Younger from Morningside. Bob Younger helped me tremendously. And when the internet came and Savas Beatie was running, doing well in the early 2000s, 2005, 2006, he would call me. He didn't understand the internet. He wasn't going to go to the internet. He wasn't going to deal with Amazon. He wasn't going to do ebooks when the ebooks started coming on, that kind of thing. And I kept telling him, Bob, this wave is it's going to drown you if you don't get in front of it and get a surfboard, right? It's going to drown you. You have to do it. He was too old school to at the end, toward the end of his career, he wasn't going to do it.
Right.
But I remember turning to our staff. I want to say it was 2008, but I might be wrong. But it was really early, saying we're going to do ebooks because I don't want to read an ebook. I still don't want to read an ebook.
I'm
but
with you there.
They're going to be there. They're coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we were, I think, 2 years ahead of Simon and Schuster on ebooks. And because the reason was not because I'm some genius, it's because you sort of see what's coming, and that toothpaste is not going back in the tube.
Oh, definitely not. No.
You got to deal with it. And one of the abilities of a small company is you can be nimble, right? You can turn on a dime and you can do things quickly. Bigger companies can't do that. And so we saw it coming, and so that internet sort of brought that together. So it created different revenue channels, audio, ebooks, that kind of thing. But it also creates terrible problems. And let me give you one of the problems: Amazon, right?
Yeah.
And so I use Amazon. I mean, everybody uses Amazon. I don't buy books from Amazon, but I buy the general stuff from Amazon. Saves me a lot of time, saves me money. It's a good way to do it. But the problem with a company like Amazon is, and I'll actually tell you the net structure. Just when I tell this to people, it just blows them away. They can't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And Nathan, I'll be back to your question there in just a second.
Cool.
Amazon takes about 53% is their discount requirement. And a distributor to sell onto Amazon, our distributor takes like 35%.
Mm-hmm.
So when you sell a book at $35 book, and then you take 53% off that, and then you take 36% off that, that's what we get.
There's not a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like 30, it's about 30%, right?
Yeah. And
So let's say we get $10 for a book that's sold on Amazon. Well, the author gets $1 or less, depends. And then after that, every cost has to, salaries, lights, electricity, print.
We lost audio from you briefly.
So there's nothing left. There's not enough left, right?
Mhm.
And so that's why we've built up our direct sales to customers, built up a customer base, because if you don't have direct support and you can't sell to the parks and all that stuff directly without a distributor, you're out of business. But we can. And so we do all that. So Amazon's kind of a little bit of gravy for us, but it's a very small part of our company because I understand why people buy books there because, budgets are tight. I completely understand. And I tell people, if it's the only way you can afford books, go buy them there. 100% behind you, man. I get it. But like anything, Civil War publishing is a craft publishing. It's like a micro brew. It's not Budweiser. It's your local tap down there making the favorite porter and ale you love, right? But if you don't support them, they're gone. And so if you want to keep craft companies going, support them directly, because that's the best way to keep them in existence. And I know I'm rambling on here.
This is great.
Like
it's fantastic.
What did we say when I first came on? Like the bum who like climbed out of on this dirty shirt.
Fuck him out.
My hair's sticking out.
I'm in a T-shirt over here with Lincoln's face on it.
Well, yeah, but you're not on video, so how do I know?
There you go. Yeah. Ooh, called him out, Joshy.
Yeah, that's right.
Hold on.
Anthony popped on. He's like, Ted's not.
There we go. Yeah, you switch sides now too.
Sorry,
yeah.
Ted, you've also got a really good social media team as well. I mean, whoever does that, you really got a good, reach out there.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, that's another thing from the internet, right?
Yeah, Terry said the same thing too.
It develops an entirely new way to interact with your readership. And so I appreciate you saying that. We spend some time doing that. And actually Kenya does all that. Our pit bull does all that.
I love that stuff so much.
Yeah.
Terry brought up something great too. I think this really piggybacks off your conversation when we were talking about all the meetups. He said you do meet your audience where they live, and
that's a really great point.
It is. I love that he brought that up, because that's the thing. You see these Antietam and Gettysburg, and I mean, I can't stress how many people are able to find that as a medium meeting place, if that makes any sense. Like they're driving from all over the East Coast. But for some reason, all of us Civil War nuts or buffs, whatever you want to call us, we all somehow siphon into Antietam and Gettysburg. So like to have those two there is some strategy to that. And I think it's awesome. And it's great because it is a logistical genius to have everybody meet up in these two locations.
Well, there's that. And I'm not sure what Terry's talking about. With social media, that's true. Because you guys see into my office.
Mm-hmm.
You get to see the people that work there. You get to see Kenya on the floor. I've posted social media in my home. You guys post social media in your home, and so I get to meet the people that I never got to meet before in their homes through social media, which is pretty cool, right?
I'm from across the pond, so I'm testament to that.
Okay, yeah, he's got a good point too. Yeah,
I don't meet any of you guys if it's not for this.
This is true. This is true. This Unfiltered wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't for social media. I mean, I met a guy from England, and this is what happened.
Yeah. Well,
that's crazy. I met him as a Gettysburg. I was literally in Gettysburg when I met him, talking about sickles on social media. And that's crazy.
You got to read Hessler's book on sickles.
Oh, I have it too. I had it when I was working at Chancellor's.
Oh yeah, it's a great book.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Nathan had a question. What does the future look like for Savas Beatie? Well, I mean, it looks pretty good. It's solid. We got a lot of good stuff coming up. I've got 3 years of titles ahead of me to publish that look fantastic. I just turned 65, so I'm not a young guy anymore. Perfectly healthy, just not a young guy anymore. I'd like to not work any longer. The problem is, this will sound very strange, I suppose. I've told this to some of my closest customers and friends, is I actually worry about who's going to do it if I don't.
Right.
And I swear to God, I don't mean that to sound unhumble, because you just can't start a company today. You can't. And so I couldn't start the company I've built. I couldn't do it today. You just can't just jump start it without it'd be way too much money. And you need too many good people that know what they're doing. My staff is outstanding. I have the greatest team I've ever worked with. They're just wonderful ladies, and they are just top notch. But I wonder, I mean, Simon & Schuster isn't going to do this. Penguin's not going to do this. So who's going to publish these? And then now there are some companies who will throw them out there with no editing, but the university presses are shying away from this stuff as fast as they can. So if they're not going to do it, and so who's going to do it? That's one of the reasons why I keep publishing, because I'm a little worried. I don't know who's going to jump in.
If somebody has to, because this is a beautiful organization that you've got. I mean, everything that you publish is great. I mean, look at what people are saying. And when you send us a private message asking questions about books, you always do your best to answer them for us, which is greatly appreciated. That's all. See, and that's where it's personable. Like you just said, Simon & Schuster isn't going to do that. Penguin isn't going to. No, they're not. So to have that connection too, to have that personability to a publishing company, I think that's also what drives that nail home and making it.
I'm gonna give this credit. I'm gonna give this credit to my late parents. Let me tell you why, and my grandparents. So I'm Greek. All Greeks run restaurants, right? Everybody knows that. and so they ran. My grandpa ran bars, and my parents ran. Remember the show Cheers? Okay, so we ran that kind of an outfit for about 25 years. Yeah, and my mom and dad did. So I grew up there. Literally, I grew up in that kind of an environment with the customers, and I'd be behind the bar, and I'd be sitting around listening to people, and I watched my parents. And my dad, he held court as the bartender, and he was funny and a World War II guy. They were all World War II vets then talking. And my mom she loved her customers. She cared about the customers. She sang at their weddings. She was an opera singer and a phenomenal singer. And she baked cakes on their birthdays. And she just interacted with the customers in such a way that it was amazing to watch, because I grew up with it, and they just, to the day she died, they just couldn't believe that kind of personal touch. She didn't do it because she was hoping they'd buy an extra glass of beer. She was doing it because she really loved them.
Right.
And so when I went into business for myself, when I practiced law for a long time, I treated my clients that way. And then when I went into publishing, I'm thinking, I want to be treated the way I want to treat my customers, the way I wanted to be treated. I wanted to read the kind of books that I thought should be being published. And I want to create a community that was kind of like the community I grew up in with my mom and dad in the bar. It was an amazing environment. It was like one live creature. It was crazy. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think we've done as well as we can.
I'd say it's fantastic. I
want it to carry on. That's really what I want it to do.
I salute you.
That is awesome. Tim Wilging over on Facebook says social media outreach is awesome. More so, there is an incredible range of titles that fit niche interests while simultaneously reaching a broad audience. The Varus title is one such example that I absolutely love. Awesome.
Okay. Thank you. I named my band after the Varus, after Arminius and Varus. So, yeah. So
let's talk about that when we close down today too.
That's your. Absolutely, we'll talk about that.
That's your stress relief, is it?
Many of the books that we've published are books that I go out and I try to find, and I'll put an author and a topic together, or I'll find somebody that's working on something, and I'll get them to flesh out a manuscript, and I'll tell them I'll wait 3 years, write it up. And the Varus book was a privately published book by an Air Force guy who found the Varus battlefield. And nobody believed him. And so he put this book out on it. And then I read the book privately printed, and I thought, oh my God, this needs to be, fixed up and cleaned up and printed traditionally. So that's how we ended up with the book, The Lost Legions. Yeah, phenomenal book.
Good to know. I might have to add that to my library. That's one I can say I don't have, but
packaged like a steak from an old-time butcher.
I know. I loved that.
Oh my God! I'm going to trademark that line.
You need to, because that is very much awesome. How it is, like opening one of those boxes. It's amazing.
That's really good. Wow. Shane, I'm still working on my book. When I'm working on everybody else's book, I can't get my own book done. I'm 2/3 of the way done writing it, and it's probably another year, and then I'll have it done.
Great. Well, Ted, let's close out tonight with some rock stuff. I'm so happy to hear about this too. Let's talk about music closing out tonight. What got you? Yeah, we talked about a little bit what got you started with the bass, but like, what's going on today with music? Because you're still playing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I am. Not as much, right? So, I'm trained on the classical piano. That was my instrument, and I played keyboards in bands when I was a teenager. Yeah, Chopin, Mozart, and Beethoven, baby. And so I played in keyboards in a band in Iowa, and I was the only keyboard player around in North Iowa, right? And there weren't many. So I played in a couple groups. I'm in high school, and I'm playing in like Omaha, Minneapolis. I'm 16, and I'm playing living in hotels and playing on the weekends and skipping school, and it was crazy what my parents let me do. And God bless them. I'm glad they did. And so as I got older, I went to college and did my thing and started, playing bass too with different bands. And my brother joined us, and he he became a guitarist with us, and he jumped in a couple of my early bands, and we've always been friends and grew up together. We're still best friends, and he's played in a lot of bands I've been in. And so I stopped. I was in a band called Disciple, and we played about 5 states, had a bus, did all that kind of stuff. And then finally I decided, I was typing term papers in dressing rooms and doing crazy things. And I finally decided, this is crazy. I need to go back to school. And I gave up what I really wanted to do. I mean, I really wanted to do it, but I was a realist too. And I'm thinking, this is dumb. I'm not going to do this. So I finished up law school, went to the West Coast, and I didn't touch a bass for 30 years. Didn't even pick one up. In fact, my Rickenbacker that I had 4001 was stolen back in like 83, I think.
Oh, dude.
And so I didn't even have a bass in my house. I never touched it again. Taught my daughter how to play piano, and I did some piano and stuff, but I never touched a bass again. And in 2011 or 12, I bought one, and man, I couldn't even play it. I had to remember what strings or what, and I couldn't even play the darn thing. And I was sort of embarrassed that I bought it. Like, I'll never be able to play this thing. But I stuck with it. It came back pretty quick. And in 2014, my brother says to me, because we lived together out in California, he lived like 2 miles away, and he said, why don't we start a band again? Mm-hmm. And so, no drama, no drugs, no craziness, just get guys who were all former pros who knew how to know their business, and just play in Northern California and sleep in our beds. And so we put together bands, and I fired a lot of guys because I couldn't get the right guys.
Yeah. And
finally we found the right mix. We've had this mix for a long time. And we primarily our names of our band is Arminius. And you can find us on Arminius, the band, on Facebook. And we primarily would do power shows and open up for other bands, right? So anywhere from 35 minutes to an hour concert sets is what we do. And so we've played with guys from Doug Aldrich. We played with Doug Aldrich. We played with Burning Rain. They had guys from Dokken and Ace Frehley and those guys. We played with guys from Dio, Def Leppard.
No kidding.
Black Sabbath, Ozzy. We played with Pat Travers, I think 3 times. We played for the Iron Maidens, the all-girl band.
That's awesome.
They're phenomenal. We played with them, I think, 2 or 3 times. Bullet Boys. We opened for an all-star band called Hookers and Blow. And they're pretty famous guys, and they change members. So when we played with the band, it was Slash's bass player, Guns N' Roses keyboard player, Dio's guitarist, I think UFO's drummer. Anyway, so we played with him on New Year's Eve. That was a riot, let me tell you.
I can only imagine.
And so it's just really fun. We played with Ripper Owens from Judas Priest, and Scott Warren, the keyboard player for Rainbow and Dio. We played for one of their bands. So I mean, I was just talking. You'll know this. Vinny Appice, the drummer, right? One of the greatest drummers in the world, and we played with him twice now, and this big club in Sacramento. And I said to him, we were talking the other day, a few months ago, and he said, I said, I used to go see you in stadiums. And I'm standing there, and I'm talking to Vivian Campbell from Def Leppard. He was there. And I said, I used to go see you guys in stadiums. And so it's really just an honor to play with you guys here. And so we ended up, our last song we played that night was Wasted from Def Leppard.
That's cool.
Yeah. So we go into the kitchen area, the back area where Last in Line is getting ready to come on. Of course, Vivian Campbell plays Wasted in Def Leppard. And we're like, so did you happen to hear Wasted? And I cannot do an English accent well. So sorry, my friend. He says, or he's Irish, actually. He's Irish. He says, well, yeah, because I heard it. Yeah, it's a little slow. He goes, you did the album version. And he goes, we tend to do the live version. It's a little more of a gallop. And I was laughing. I'm thinking, so you heard it. He goes, oh, yeah. He goes, we heard it. He goes, you did a good job. And I thought, holy crap.
To hear that from one of them, too, especially.
Hear that from him. Yeah. And we did the Trooper. We did the Trooper.
Cool.
Maiden, and got the whole big flag and all that. And we do it well. And the singer, James Freeland, who sings for Last in Line, is one of the greatest live singers I've ever heard in my life. If you ever get a chance to see Last in Line,
check him out. All right, good to know.
So he thought we did the Trooper really well. He commented on that. And so the reason I'm saying all that is because we're just a bunch of guys who have day jobs. We don't do it professionally, but we're semi-pro in our background, and we really have a lot of fun doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that for my business, I had to move to the East Coast because we use East Coast Sports. We need an East Coast office because of some changing things. And so I had to leave the band. And my brother and all that. And so my goal was, when I go back to the West Coast every so often, is to set it up around a gig.
Mm-hmm.
And so our agent is going to set up gigs. So we had technically broken up for a while. And then 3 weeks ago, I went back and surprised my brother on his birthday.
I saw that. Yeah.
We had it set up in his backyard in Lake Tahoe, and the whole band was there, and he didn't even know we were going to play. So we had a reunion gig in his backyard and played an hour. It was phenomenal. So now it looks like we have another big gig set up in January.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So
sweet.
Our goal is every 3 months or so to do a big gig. So that's what we're doing.
Awesome.
That's super cool.
We got some closing comments from Fernando in Venezuela saying thanks for this conversation. Blessings from Venezuela. And then Artie saying good evening to us as well. David Pope said good program. And Andrea Quinn also said thank you for this great talk. It was really nice to meet you, Ted.
Likewise, Andrea. Thank you.
Keep one up. All right. And then we have Jim Schmick as well saying 2-1 in Gettysburg. Oh, man. An Arminius show in Gettysburg? That's accessible.
Oh, yeah. Let's all go.
Yeah,
let's do it.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Hey, does anybody have any closing things? Anthony, do you have a Christmas cracker joke for us? So we have this horrible way of finishing up with these dad jokes.
Well, he calls it Christmas. It's a dad joke, really, yeah. But Christmas cracker joke, yeah. I'm going to get mine up. Hang on.
Oh, he's prepared. Okay, so Ted, you got to bear with us.
Go on, Anthony. You know you always close
I have two.
You have two.
I just want to say I didn't talk very much, but it was great listening to a legend in this.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much.
You know, I learned so much from what happens, like with just these books that are behind me. It's very interesting.
It is.
Well, I appreciate it. Just for people who want to know, just so you do know, because I do it for almost for free. I have a program that I call Write Now, WRITE now. Right. The link is on the Savas Beatie website at the top. And it's not for writing, because that's the least important thing. It's all about navigating the machinery of publishing and building your talent stack and trying to build your brand and to help you get published. And so I'm going to start up the classes again. In fact, I've got one coming up on copyrights and fair use and that kind of thing. But so if anybody's interested in something like that, go and check that out. It's almost free. It's embarrassing.
I'd be all for that.
Yeah.
All right, Darren, you ready?
Okay, I've got one. This is a Christmas cracker joke as well.
That's great, Jim.
Hang on. What do you get if you eat Christmas decorations? Tinselitis.
That's a dad joke.
It is a dad joke. Anthony, what do you got?
If lightning were to hit an orchestra, who would be hit by the lightning? If lightning were to hit an orchestra, who is most likely to be hit? The conductor.
The conductor.
Oh, yeah, mate.
That's awesome.
Wait, one more. Insurance brokers are going around right now telling campers that if their tent gets stolen, they won't be covered.
Anyway, into the bar.
I hate that.
Anyway,
that's terrible.
Terry said boo. You got booed by Terry.
Boo. Boo that
Joe
man.
said ECW is a gateway drug and I'm powerless over the effect. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, who knew we'd ever have 50 of those things out?
Seriously, that is incredible.
Wow.
Thank you. Shout out to ECW.
Really,
great folks.
Yeah.
Charles Benoist, a great talk.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us tonight and hanging out with us while we ramble on about fun stuff. We got the conductor from Jim Schmick. Well, folks, thank you guys again. And Ted, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to hang out with
my
us
pleasure.
and have a
Yeah, thank
conversation.
you for having me. I
Absolutely.
really
Now, please, Tyler. It's nearly 2 a.m.
Yeah, this guy over across the pond
That's
probably
crazy.
needs to go to bed. So
Yeah.
you guys have a great evening. And if you didn't catch this live, thank you for listening so much on Spotify later. We will see